Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a Brightspace Community Site webinar. We're excited to have you all join us today to find out more about adoption strategies in education. My name is Roxana Lavrekovic, and I am your Brightspace Community Facilitator, here to help you connect you to D2L's technology, services, resources, and content. With a history in higher educational institutions, I joined the D2L team because I'm an avid believer in the power education has to transform lives. Since technology in the world of learning is ever-changing, so are we, and we're always looking for ways to improve and listen to our members. So please don't hesitate to contact me should you have any questions or concerns. Before we get started today, I would like to just quickly go over a few housekeeping rules. I'd ask that you please put all your comments in the chat box on the left-hand side of your screen and any questions you may have for our presenters under the questions and answer box. Any questions that we're unable to get to today, we will be following up with in our community updates blog, and we will be certain to tag the individuals who asked those questions so that you can gain answers directly from our subject matter experts. Now, to begin today's presentation, I would like to introduce our presenters. Daniel Hoppe, Jr. is the Senior Advisor Consultant for Higher Education with D2L. Mr. Hoppe has spent the last 8 years dedicated to best practices in distant education and online learning, focused on driving faculty adoption, professional development, and strategic planning, growth, and change management within higher education. Daniel is focused on assisting clients with strategically planning for growth and change focus. Tracy Collins is an advisory consultant specializing in K-12. In her current role as an advisory consultant, Tracy helps clients successfully plan and grow adoption by mapping strategic goals and priorities within an adoption framework. In this approach, she considers a multi-stakeholder engagement, including leadership, sponsorship, IT, curriculum, as well as teachers, students, and parents. From a professional development perspective, she looks to couple tool training to pedagogy as an important component to teacher training and transformative practice. And with that being said, I'd be happy to pass this off to Tracy to begin today's presentation.
All right, everyone. So I've just unmuted myself, so hopefully everybody can hear me today. So I'm going to kick things off just with the agenda, just to let you guys know what we're going to be covering today. So as Roxana suggested, we're going to be talking about what an adoption strategy is. We're going to be looking at organizational readiness. We'll also be considering teacher and faculty readiness, strategic planning, and a process that we've launched called the Plan, Achieve, Measure. So to kick things off, let's start by defining what an adoption strategy is. So there are a few ways we can look at adoption. One way is to look at a number of logins. So this could be for the learning environment or for ePortfolio. It could be at a program level or a course level or number of users that you're looking from a registration perspective. And this is a really great starting point for our clients as they start to think about adoption. Another way is to consider how usage of the Brightspace platform aligns with your organizational goals. So things like student retention, learner and faculty engagement, changing teacher practice, reducing release time, travel, and other associated costs for professional development activities, increasing institutional student satisfaction scores through a survey, increasing graduation rates, etc. These are all things that we can also look at when we're thinking about the Brightspace platform. The other neat thing about the adoption strategy is that it's not static. So an adoption strategy is living and evolving. So as your priorities shift, which they always do, you can change gears on the fly. So the main thing is to really have a process in place to document what you're hoping to accomplish and to look at that over time and be nimble in your response to iterate and change the plan as you need. So the key here is to start with the end in mind. What do you want to accomplish and what are the steps to get you there? So as I mentioned, we're going to cover some approaches that you can use at your local institution. This session will be hands-on, so I'm going to be posting links to our free resources page, and we'll be flipping back and forth from this PowerPoint deck to the free resources to show you how you can take a look, how you can take what we've posted and customize to your local needs. So I'm actually going to pause right now. I'm going to drop that link, the main link, into the chat pod for you now. And as we go through, excuse me, please refer back to that link, and that's the link that we'll be showcasing with the resources. Okay. One of the guiding thoughts to our adoption approach has been to identify and define stages or levels in organizational and faculty or teacher readiness. If we have any K-12ers on the line today, some of you may be familiar with the SAMR model or the TIMS model. So TIMS is the technology integration model out of Florida. So these types of models are similar to rubrics. So looking at an assessment in terms of where you are today and where you want to go. And from an adoption perspective, you can look at potentially aligning your programs to help move the needle forward. In terms of a teacher or faculty readiness, for example, if you did a survey of your teachers and most of them are at the first time level of readiness, maybe over time you want to look at creating professional development programs that are going to help move your teachers across these different buckets of expertise over time. So that's one approach. I'm actually going to turn things over to my colleague Dan now, and he's going to walk us through both organizational readiness and the faculty teacher readiness approaches. As I mentioned, we'll also be flipping back to that free resources page. The goal is that you'll be able to follow along with us as we showcase the resources that we've made available to you. So I'm going to mute myself.
Perfect. Thank you, Tracy. So as Tracy said, we're going to focus a little bit of our time now talking about organizational readiness and faculty readiness. So first, we'll talk about organizational readiness. So much like defining an adoption strategy, we want to give some guidelines around how we would define organizational readiness. And it really is getting to the heart of kind of the current state of the organization, how it sits today, what are the current activities, what is it that's taking place? And there's a couple of reasons why this is really important. It really assists in the identification of what that current status looks like, and it helps in identifying the readiness for change and or growth. So, in our position with D2L, Tracy and I are consultants working with clients, and I can't tell you how many times I'll sit down with a group of individuals from the same institution, and we'll have a conversation around a change process or an adoption process. And I'll start asking the question around, well, tell me about your current practices, or tell me about what you're currently doing. And it's amazing. You'll end up with 5 or 6 different answers regarding that level of consistency or what the current status looks like. And so that's why the concept of organizational readiness is so key to the kind of the beginning of this process, because it does kind of level the playing field, if you will, by allowing the organization to truly have an understanding as to what that current status looks like in preparation for how we start planning for what future goals might look like as well through that process. So as Tracy mentioned, one of the things that we've done is create some free resources that is available for our clients to have the opportunity to utilize and to really kind of kick things off from an adoption standpoint. So we're going to take a look at a couple of these right now. So first, we're going to look at the organizational readiness checklist. And as Tracy's opening that up using that link that she put in the chat box. And really what this checklist is meant to be is just that, the chance to walk through these different categories and kind of ask yourself some of these questions with regard to where we stand today. And, a really great way to look at this would be, how you actually go about collecting some of this data in preparation. And some of the recommendations that we have made is kind of having a core team in place that would assist with the identification and facilitation of this. And that core team really should have representation from all the key areas and stakeholders within your institution. Some other things to consider would be some focus groups with individuals, again, from those stakeholders. So maybe a focus group of faculty, a focus group of students, a focus group of staff and other key stakeholders that really can kind of help you gain that insight and that perspective as to kind of where you stand today. So again, this document that's available is meant to kind of walk you through some things to consider, some things to think about as you begin and kind of go through the organizational readiness process. The next document that we'll highlight a little bit is the organizational readiness checklist. I'm sorry, the worksheet. We just looked at the checklist, the worksheet. And this one actually is a great tool to utilize at that very beginning stage. So maybe even before you kind of go to the checklist, and as you're starting to put those groups together, being able to walk through this worksheet and kind of answer some of the questions and then share those answers amongst your colleagues will really help you understand if you're indeed on the same page, if there is a level of consistency, or if there's some questions regarding, well, maybe we're not doing this way anymore, or maybe there's a different opinion of how we can or should be doing things. So again, a great internal tool to utilize to kind of build that level of consensus. And then the next two documents specific to organizational readiness are the organizational readiness rubric starting page and the rubric itself. So first we'll start with the starting page. And really this is kind of a kickoff page to kind of truly explain what the rubric was kind of made for, or how it was created, what the intent of the actual rubric is. But I think the key thing here is to understand that, you know, we've put some tools and some resources available to you, but obviously there's a high level of customization that's going to be needed in order to meet the needs of your individual institutions. We make some recommendations around some questions regarding demographics and those types of things, again, to kind of gain some preliminary data and those types of resources. But this starting page is kind of meant to be almost like your instructions for facilitating and utilizing the actual rubric that we've put together. And then finally, we actually have the organizational readiness rubric itself that we've created. And again, this is a rubric that's been created based on some research, based on some experiences that myself and my colleagues have had with regard to this type of work. And what we've done is we've actually put these in the different categories that are very closely aligned to that adoption spectrum that Tracy showed in the earlier slide. And so the goal here is that you'd be able to utilize this rubric to truly get to the heart of where your institution stands on these different categories in an effort to prepare to go through a full adoption strategy process. And again, all of these resources and documents are available to you via the community, utilizing the link that Tracy has made available to you at this time. And with that, I think we'll move into faculty readiness. So much like organizational readiness, the concept of faculty readiness is really important. And it really suggests it's a state at which that faculty member currently is today. So again, much like organizational readiness, we're going through a process to kind of understand the current situation, the current practices. Faculty readiness is really aimed at trying to identify where the faculty stands today with regard to the utilization of, say, the Brightspace platform or education technology or whatever you're trying to adopt through your adoption strategy. And many times people take a look at faculty readiness and they say, okay, so we're looking at experiences, we're looking at education, those types of things, but almost equally important is the concepts of things like perception and opinions around these types of things. And so being able to really hone in on those elements of the faculty readiness piece of things that are very important as you kind of move through this process and identifying where your faculty sit. So as I mentioned, it really can be viewed as this process that does assist in the identification of what those current statuses look like with regard to your faculty, but it really also will assist in the planning for your training and professional development. So I'll give you an example. In my former role, I was the Dean of Distance Education of a small private institution, and when I first switched over to utilizing the Brightspace platform with that institution, we didn't do this step. We missed this step of faculty readiness. And when we started creating our training and professional development for faculty, we realized pretty quickly that we kind of missed the mark. that we didn't fully understand, or we thought we knew where our faculty were from a readiness standpoint, but the reality of where they really were was very different. So by taking those formal steps of going through a process like faculty readiness at your institution, that guesswork is kind of out, and it allows you to really get to the heart of where your faculty are, and with that allows you to plan more customizable approaches to both training and professional development to help them move along that spectrum, if you will, in the utilization and adoption of your education technology, and specifically your Brightspace platform. So again, we touched upon some of this already, but why is it so important to focus on faculty readiness? And as I mentioned, it's going to help with training, but it's also going to help for the planning of things like new courses and programs. So as you start looking at kind of futuristic opportunities and what growth potential might look like, having an understanding of where your current faculty are, or as you're looking at bringing in new faculty, it really will help you identify kind of what the needs look like from a readiness standpoint. And it really does empower your faculty members to kind of think about that what's next. So once you kind of identify at what stage your faculty are from a readiness standpoint, it allows you to kind of push the envelope, if you will. So if you know that there's more opportunities for a higher level of adoption in a certain tool set or functionality, you kind of can set those benchmarks, if you will, with your faculty, again, once you have that understanding. As we mentioned, the training and professional development in those, and introduction of new technological opportunities, but it really is very heavily tied to adoption, which is why we do feel it's such an important factor in a good adoption strategy. So then we're going to take a look at the resources that we have available on the community site that we've put together. And again, if you click on that link, as Tracy is doing now for me, we have two documents that we'll be highlighting. First is the Faculty Readiness Rubric starting page. And so very much like the organizational readiness starting page, it kind of is that instruction sheet, if you will, to kind of explain the background of the rubric, ways to customize it, ways to utilize it, focus on, again, some of those demographic type pieces that are important to understand kind of where your faculty are coming from, things like, number of years of teaching experience and those types of things. So we give you some very key questions to kind of start your rubric off with, if you will, and then some instructions on how best to use the actual rubric itself. And then finally, we actually have the faculty readiness rubric itself. So very similarly to the organizational readiness rubric, we've built those into categories that are aligned very closely, again, to that adoption strategy spectrum that we put together. And again, the goal here is that you should be able to walk through this rubric and have a really good understanding where those faculty members are, which is going to help you from a planning perspective, both for things like training, for professional development, for new programs and course development. So again, those resources are available in the community, utilizing that link that Tracy put in the chat for you. And with that, I believe we're turning things back over to Tracy, and she's going to talk about strategic planning.
Hi, everyone. Yes, that's right. So we are going to take a look at some of the strategic planning considerations, as well as a process called Plan, Achieve, Measure that you can use to help build out your adoption strategy. So most of you probably already have a strategic plan at your institution. The big question is, how does blended learning or online learning play into that? Is blended or online learning explicitly called out? So if the answer is no, the next logical question is there a way to elevate your blended or online programs to become part of the strategic priorities? Alternatively, can you springboard off of other key priorities to showcase how your programs can help meet your institution's existing priorities as outlined in a strategic plan? If the answer is yes, then your adoption program will ideally align with success criteria that are defined in the existing strategic plan. So again, these might be things like student retention, engagement, graduation. These are hot issues that everyone in education is preoccupied with. So if there's a way that you can help solve your institution's issues by leveraging the Brightspace platform, then this is one way to do that. So I'm going to flip now to some of the strategic planning resources. So we're going to take a look at two resources. One is a SWOT analysis worksheet, and then the other is a white paper. So the white paper is actually not on the free resources page. So I'm going to just quickly drop that link in for you as well. So let me just grab that, and I'll put that in the chat pod for you. Did that copy? There's the white paper link. So if we go back to the adoption link that I shared, here is the adoption strategy SWOT analysis worksheet. So the SWOT analysis can be used at either the strategic planning level or even within a program level. So SWOT, as most of you know, stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And it can help you think through and define what areas of priority you can identify for your Brightspace adoption program. And the other resources I mentioned that I dropped into the link into the chat pod is a white paper that was prepared by my colleague Dan. So it's about considering, so not just for clients who have migrated, but maybe new clients or even existing clients, to think about how they might think about how their programs can align with other strategic areas of priority at their institution. Okay. So next what I'd like to do is take a look at the Plan, Achieve, Measure process. So the Plan, Achieve, Measure process is a template that you can use to build and manage your adoption program. So the goal of the Plan, Achieve, Measure process is to identify key programs that contribute to your overall organizational objectives. It also allows you to measure your program's successes and to celebrate those successes. The first phase is called the plan phase. In this phase, you're going to work with your team. And when I say team, and Dan alluded to this earlier as well, we're really talking about a comprehensive team. So that can include program leads, IT, and a leadership sponsor. So program leads, you may have representatives from various departments. You could have somebody from HR if you're using the platform for professional development. You could have other folks who are creating content for professional development around blended learning and online learning, etc. So anybody who has a vested interest in using Brightspace to deliver programs could be at the table. So as part of the plan phase, you'd be looking at your organizational objectives. Some of these might come from strategic documents, as we mentioned earlier. We'll be looking at who your target audiences are, or the people who will be consuming programs. We'll be looking at your current programs and initiatives that you have underway. We'll be looking at obstacles and finding ways or strategies to overcome those obstacles. And finally, you'll move to what I like to call the heart of the plan phase, which is really drilling down and creating success criteria or goals for the adoption program. Here is that same process shown in a different way. And again, typically we look at 1 to 3 organizational objectives and how blended or online learning supports those, leadership stakeholders that are involved, people who are consuming the programs, the current programs and initiatives that align with blended or online programs, obstacles, and then again the heart of this, which is the defining the success criteria. So Achieve is really where you build your program based on the success criteria you identified in the previous phase, which was the plan phase. So as I mentioned, the success criteria is the heart of this, and all of your activities derive or are driven by the success criteria that you defined. And measure is where you take a look at your program successes and not only just sort of measure against the success criteria that you've identified over time, but taking the time and the opportunity to celebrate those successes. So finding a way, a communication plan or other elements to help share those successes among your stakeholders so that you can broadcast some of those wins to your other group stakeholders. So what I'd like to do now is take a look at some of the free resources that we have available. So we're going to take a look at the Plan, Achieve, Measure workbook. And again, we've got these customized for higher education, K-12 and corporate. We're going to take a look at as well at a couple of papers that are targeted for K-12 specifically. So in terms of the Plan, Achieve, Measure, they're down here, and as I mentioned, you've got the corporate template, you've got a K-12 template, and you have a higher education template. So I've actually opened these ahead of time because I wanted to just highlight a couple of things for everybody on the line today. So what we've done, so when you open these documents, there's 4 tabs at the bottom, the Start Here button, which explains the process, the Plan phase, which is the second tab, the Achieve phase, which is here, and the Measure phase, which is here. So I just want to flip back to the Plan phase because we've done, we've personalized these by vertical for you to make your lives a little bit easier. So over here in the right side, you'll notice that there are little boxes. These are sort of like cheat notes or thoughts to help you think through this process. So Dan, as Dan mentioned earlier, he really specializes in higher ed, and I'm working primarily in the K-12 and enterprise spaces right now. So what we've done is we've collaborated, we've come up with these based on what the majority of our higher education clients are trying to accomplish. So as we mentioned earlier, some of your organizational objectives can be derived from things like strategic planning documents, team goals and initiatives, or program and project goals. So as you can see, we've pre-identified or pulled out some of the key categories for you to think through in this. So essentially what you could do on from your local institution is to download these templates, work with the team, as we mentioned, having an executive sponsor or a leadership sponsor, and having representatives from IT as well as the various program or department level folks in the room to help build out what you're hoping to accomplish for the next school year and beyond. So again, down here, this is the measurable success criteria, and we've called out a couple of key areas. So you know, in terms of a sample success criteria, faculty will add 1 new course, activity, or technology associated with an attended participation of training or PD over the next school year. Faculty and students will access D2L tools once or more per week over such and such a school year. So this one here in particular resonates really well in a blended learning context. So for those of you who are using Brightspace to accomplish blended learning goals, one of the things that we found across our client base is that having teachers use the platform once or more per week is an effective practice to building adoption. So that is the higher education template, and I'm going to flip over here to the K-12 template. And again, we've got the 4 tabs, as I mentioned, so I won't go through that again, but I'll just highlight here in the plan phase, we've got the boxes already identified. So some examples and sources where you might find those objectives, key stakeholders, target audiences, programs or organizational initiatives that you might consider, obstacles, and then the success criteria. So as I mentioned here, we've got for blended learning using Brightspace once or more per week. As Dan mentioned before, when he reviewed the faculty readiness or teacher readiness rubric, is if you had completed a survey of your teachers and you found out that all your teachers were in a particular level and you wanted to move them more towards some of these innovative or transformative practices, you could aim to align your professional development activities or programs to help support or scaffold your faculty and teachers to move up 1 level. So then year over year, you could re-administer that to see where your teachers are over time. So that's a review of some of those documents. And the white papers that I mentioned are right here. So we've got a K-12 adoption best practices white paper. I actually wrote this just a while ago, and it actually corresponds quite well with the Plan, Achieve, Measure template. So if you are a K-12 client, I've put a note in here that you might consider reading this white paper to correspond with using the Plan, Achieve, Measure. And then the K-12 Implementation Adoption Strategies was authored by our other colleague, Barbara Theming, who many of you will know from the Brightspace community, from the teaching and learning space. So she authored this paper, which many of you may also find useful. Okay, so let me flip back here. All right. So a couple of other things. So we've talked about, organizational and faculty teacher readiness, strategic planning, and the Plan, Achieve, Measure process. These are all available, as we mentioned, for you to start using today. They're designed to help you start planning for and building your success. But I also wanted to highlight that our shared resource area is constantly evolving, so please do check in frequently. Before we get too far along, I also wanted to show you some other resources that we have, communication templates, etc. So the first piece are some communication templates. So up here, you'll notice there are some client emails, there's a poster down here, and there's also a pilot promotion message for those who are new to Brightspace or in the stages of implementing. This would be a pilot promotion, a pilot user confirmation message as well. And again, these could be repurposed for new program offerings, etc., that you wanted to offer. And there's also a communication plan for change to Brightspace. I believe Dan also authored that paper, so that's another document that might help you in thinking through some of the communication pieces, which are really, really important throughout your adoption planning and strategy. So the other important piece that some of you may have noticed is okay, so we'll have a question. Sorry, I just saw Roxana posted a question. We'll come back to that in a few minutes. Roxana, if that's okay. You may have noticed in the shared resources that we have client examples as well. So I'm just going to flip back and highlight some of those quickly. So New York Department of Education, that's the iLearn program. They've contributed some documents here for any K-12 clients in the room. They've got a policy, so many of our clients are struggling. Maybe they don't have a policy around blended learning. This is a document that you could take a look at and repurpose for your local needs. This is the Blended Learning Getting Started Guide, which I share with many of our K-12 clients. It's got all kinds of fantastic information in here. There's a whole spectrum of communication templates that you can use. There's profiles of what a blended learning teacher looks like. There's classroom examples. I think much of the research is based on the Christensen model. So sort of the rotational model that's fairly prevalent in K-12. So a really great resource. La Cité Collégiale is one of our Francophone clients in Ontario. Very, very innovative organization. And so if we have any clients from our Francophone client base, there are some assets here as well that you can use. And finally, we have some resources from Florence Darlington Technical College. So these actually just got posted yesterday, so just to show you how fast things are evolving. But I wanted to just talk about Florence Darlington for a sec. Some of these research, so what they did, so they're a higher ed institute, and they created a weekly program for their faculty to follow. And these documents will outline that, but they've seen some really significant results as a result of that new model. So they've got weekly activities that they promote for their faculty to use, as well as best practices for using the tools. And as a result of this new model, their faculty are more engaged. Their faculty really like the approach, helps make their lives easier. The students are much more engaged. They like the consistency from course to course in terms of how the courses are laid out and what the communication is like with their instructor. And they've seen increases in their student satisfaction survey results, as well as an increased demand for online courses. So these are things, as we mentioned, about in planning for adoption success. This is going to help springboard them to the next level as well. Okay. So we've shared some of those. Another area that we'd like to just let you know about is our shared resources. So far we've been showing you the adoption resources. That's so any client who wants to share a best practice or template or document, when you publish to the shared resource site, it will show up on our adoption page. So I'm going to drop that link in now for you, and I'm just going to show it to you quickly. These are the shared resources. Let me just drop that in here for you. So as you can see, I'm logged in up here. That's the only way you'll be able to upload. But if you roll down to the blue area, the shared member files, and you go to shared files, you'll be able to access the upload button. So once you share a file through here, it will get routed to our adoption strategy if it pertains to adoption. So we really do hope that our clients will be able to share some of their best practices with us. Okay, so I guess we're a little short on time. That went faster than we thought, but wanted to thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to turn things over to any questions here. Let's see. So Rosanna, you had posted a question. Okay, from an adoption.
Yes, I was curious to know. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello? Okay. Yes, I was curious to know from an adoption perspective, what are other clients using to define their success criteria?
Sure. So I'll speak on from the K-12 perspective. So a lot of times from a success criteria perspective, so as I showed in here, we've got those 2 Excel documents, those templates, which provide some examples. But from a blended learning perspective for K-12 clients, I have seen many clients looking at how long is it going to take their institution to get them to 100% adoption or usage of the platform. So normally often what we see is a 20 to 25% annual adoption target over time with a multi-year plan to get them to 100%. So we might see, for example, in year 1 that a district would aim or target 20 to 25% adoption. So that's, Dan, I don't know if you maybe wanted to comment for the higher ed space.
Sure. I think especially in higher ed, it is obviously very subjective and very customized based on the individual institutional needs. Obviously, a couple areas that they like seen a lot of focus on is around functionality and tool sets within the LMS itself, and being able to create benchmarks specifically for faculty to start utilization of those. And so, you might look at it, and especially it depends on kind of the vertical that they're utilizing. So whether it's fully online, flipped hybrid coach. But again, it would be more benchmark based, and it would be based again on kind of that faculty readiness level and how that proceeds based on the identified needs of the actual institution.
Great. So are there some other questions from the folks in the chat pod?
If there are no other questions, I would like to point out that Dan and Tracy both had said that they'd be willing to share their contact information, so they'll do so in the chat pod on the left-hand side. So if questions do arise at a later date, you could feel free to contact them directly and they can help get you answers. And with that being said, I'd like to take a moment and just thank you all so much for participating in today's webinar. I hope that you all got a lot out of your session and time with Dan and Tracy. Again, I'd like to repeat that all of these webinars are recorded and added to the archive list on the Brightspace Community site webinar page, which you can rewatch or share at a later date. So with that being said, all the best to you on the rest of your day, and we hope to see you soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.